perspectives, different views, one voice.
All right, welcome to the LDN Perspective. My name is Cam. I'm your host for this episode. This is episode 59, and we'll be discussing the topic of, is it racist to portray Jesus as a white person? In this particular episode, we'll be looking at the depiction of Jesus in the Bible, the portrayal of the blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus, and we'll be asking ourselves the question as to whether that particular portrayal is racist. We'll also be asking ourselves, is there an agenda, and do we give Christianity a pass for its role in slavery? So some thought-provoking sort of questions here. I'm joined in this conversation with my co-hosts.
Yeah, my name's Mo.
Ali.
And I'm Coach.
Cool. And before we get started in the conversation, just wanted to say that you can like and subscribe us on YouTube. And if you have any particular questions or thoughts about this particular topic, please leave any comments in the comment section on YouTube. So let's start this off. Is it racist to portray Jesus as white? I want to get the ball rolling by just getting some initial thoughts from you guys and what you think about it. So, Koj, who we going with first? Is it Koj or Mo?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk up first. I think with any particular statement, it's always difficult to answer anything with just a straight yes or no answer without actually fully having a concise kind of statement or question. I think with this particular question, to make it more precise, it is racist in the context of the current times and how it's being used, that image, and especially knowing that he wasn't white. So that's a deliberate fabrication or misidentification or misinformation, portraying him in another way. So I would definitely say in those contexts, it definitely is 100% racist, 100. Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in?
Who wants to chime in there? Does anyone want to go in next?
What I will say, I will question. The question I will ask is why have we allowed it to be whitewashed? And
But let's draw it back in. Is it racist to portray Jesus as a white person?
I don't want to use the word racism. I don't want to use the word racism. I want to use the word is privilege, is empowering, is the oppressor, because the racism itself, they already clearly know that Christ is burnished bronze. So burnished bronze, if you look into the color scheme of that, that is definitely brown. And if you look into the descendant of Jesus Christ himself, he came through King David, and then you go back down, it came through Abraham. So looking through the timeline, and all of that was in part of East Africa, which is, as you clearly we understand that Jesus Christ himself is Jew, and through the Israelite. So you can, if you see through the timeline, all throughout what history has said about him himself, that clearly has portrayed everything. So there's one thing of saying you're going to accept Jesus Christ as a savior, but you're ignoring that his own identity is burnished bronze. So that alone, I don't want to use the word racism. That is just because it's not all white that will be in that subject of saying that all white are racist. It's all started from since the Roman Empire. So it's a long history that has been hidden till now. So I'll just leave it there for now. But as I go on, I will elaborate more into that.
Okay, Coach, what's your view on it?
I think, and for me, it always comes back to this whole idea of because there's been conversations that people have had to say that Jesus is always painted in the image of a specific group. So you've had conversations where people might have said that if you go to certain parts of Africa, Jesus is depicted as a black man. If you go to if you go to South America, Jesus is depicted as the kind of image and the skin color of those people within those communities. And I think, obviously, for me, the reason why I think it's racist is there's been elements of this image that has been used to kind of propel the whole ideology of white supremacy and white privilege, in a sense that when you go a bit back and you go about to slavery and you go about what this imagery was kind of used to do, it makes it difficult for myself, being a black man belonging to a church, and I'll see this image of this white Jesus, because what it does do is that it kind of enforces the ideology of white supremacy. I find it difficult for a black person to be looking at a white Jesus and almost trying to picture the idea of what God will look like, because the idea of what God will look like, if you're looking at a white Jesus, then it's only right that you're going to think that God is white. So if God is white, and then you're going to then think of the white population and think that, oh, why they have this kind of supposed power, then it makes you be a bit more accepted. What's the word? I'm not finding the right way, but you almost accept your kind of fate within this kind of environment. So I think for me that's what I would say, that it is racist. But then there has been counter arguments to say that God is almost in the image of a specific community. It just happens that when it comes to the kind of like the Western community, it just happens that their ideology, or when they try to practice God in their own image, that kind of then is shared with the rest of the world. So for instance, because of Hollywood, they're able to propel that imagery of Jesus more, and it will reach a bit more people, and it will reach further parts of the world, rather than maybe in Africa, a specific community depicting that image of Jesus in black. They don't have the media power to kind of spread that visionary image of Jesus. So I guess there is that counter argument, I guess.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Just to let any members of the audience know, if you have any particular questions or points you want to put forward, please send a direct message to Koj, and he'll be able to get your views aired on this particular episode. So I think, just to touch very briefly on this particular topic, I mean, for me, it's I guess it's a question. It is a question of imagery. But in reality, I mean, we have no historical artifacts to actually tell us exactly what Jesus looked like. And when I say that, there's no photographs, there's nothing to indicate what Jesus looked like. The clear assumption would be, being from the part of the world that he was at that particular time, the assumption is that the indigenous people in that particular area were I guess they were bronze, and they had a particular complexion to them. So that's the assumption that one would make, but in reality, we have no photographs or anything to even completely back up that particular stance. I guess the question of, is it racist to portray Jesus as a white person is, I mean, a lot of it comes back to the roots of colonialism, when a lot of countries ventured out to other parts of the world, Africa being one of them. And a lot of that was to indoctrinate the people there with Christianity. One of the first travelers or countries to travel to, say, Ghana were the Portuguese, and one of the main aims of traveling to Ghana was to indoctrinate the people with Christianity. And at the time, that would have been through the portrayal of pictures of a white Jesus. But I'm open to sort of hear views from few more people as to what they think. If we've got anyone in their college, is there anyone that wants to add in any particular views at this point?
Sorry, not at the moment, but I just wanted to just touch on something you said quickly regarding the historical imagery of Jesus. Yes, there isn't any, but the Bible in itself, which is the Holy Bible, that Christians kind of, like is the message from God, actually depicts Jesus in a different kind of imagery to what is presented to us. So even if you're going by the accounts of that, the imagery that we're being depicted to is not that imagery that should be shared, if you get what I mean. So the closest thing that you could build an image of Jesus is what is said in the Bible. And I think that's just a point that I just wanted to make, because as you mentioned, that there is...
What does it say in the Bible? Can you quote that?
Can I?
I just want to finish this point. Let me just finish this point, Ali. And then I just
Yeah,
want to.
is it says Revelation chapter
Okay.
1
Yeah.
verses 14, 15. It says that the hairs of his head, it says, were white as a wool, white as a snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were the burnish of bronze. That alone, that is described what Jesus as appearance, his identity is. So for acknowledging that, but then not accepting it as what Kojo just addressed and what I'm trying to say, by not accepting it, then there's a problem there. So there is identity there. There is even IBM, for example. IBM have done a research, took them over 10 years of doing a research, right? And within that 10 years of doing that research, they went the whole world, they traveled in the whole world, right? And this was with Dr. Theron Williams, which says the Bible is black. They've done a research, and it took them 10 years, as I was saying, and they came to a point where the first man was Adam, and it was in East Africa. So East Africa, if you put into that, it's in Africa, and then obviously Ethiopia as well within that time period. But the Bible historically has mentioned his identity, his appearance, and what he looks like. So for not knowing, for not actually trying to get to that point and trying to define it and accepting it, then that's where the bigger problem is.
Yeah, I did want to come in. So I did want to talk a bit of some kind of history in terms of when Jesus was first being depicted as a white, blonde hair, blue-eyed individual, or at least a white Caucasian anyway, in that sense. So what you'll find, as Kojo mentioned before, a lot of different societies where Christianity went through portrayed Jesus Christ in the image of their local people. So you'll get countries like Ethiopia, even South Indian, South Asian countries, they all have pictures of Jesus that looks like them and their local people. And so what you'll also find is around the 15th century, this is the Renaissance time in the whole Italy and Milan, you've got them also now starting to draw Jesus, but in their own kind of personal like. So you've got the big Last Supper picture, for example, by Leonardo da Vinci, where he portrays Jesus at the Last Supper and he announces that someone will betray him amongst his disciples, and you've got all the other disciples angry. And obviously, when Da Vinci has drawn him, he has no idea what Jesus looks like, but he basically puts down an image of what he thinks the Last Supper would look like in his mind. And obviously, he's going to use people that look like him. So in those kind of contexts, it's not racist. I don't think that it's racist to be drawing a picture and using that picture locally amongst your own people to portray a figure that you see so highly. I think the dangers where it comes is more in the 1800s, where around the whole slavery period, basically the British, as you may say, or the white Europeans, because it wasn't just the British, it was the Portuguese as well, the Spanish and that, they hung on to this whole description of Jesus whereby they say that he was blinding light, and then they now ascertain the words purity, light, and white to the image of Jesus. And then they also add in this whole darkness being evil. So dark and black and stuff is being evil. And in doing this, they use this doctrine, so they weaponize Christianity towards their white supremacy agendas in their missionaries. And that's when they're doing the whole slavery and they're trying to push Christianity onto Africa. So then in those contexts, I would say it's racist because of how they're using that image. But initially, I personally don't think it was racist in terms of, in the 1500s anyway, what they were doing through white Europe of portraying Jesus as white. It's how it was then used later on, and knowing that he was different, because at them times they didn't really know that he was described differently. I'm talking the artists that were painting him. not necessarily the church. The church probably knew and left it and didn't say otherwise, but that's a whole different thing. But in terms of them, when someone is doing it, I think not knowing, so the whole ignorance argument, I wouldn't say it is, but it's how it was then used to weaponize white supremacy using Christianity. I think that was the dangerous part in it.
Mo, I think I might be wrong on this, but if they're not knowing when they did when they draw Jesus Christ, right? You have to understand the timeline where the Roman Empire was so huge. I think this is what probably we need to understand clearly. They were so huge. They realized that when Christ died, that actually he was Christ. So what they did before, you have to remember, before they used to kill Christian. You have to remember this. They used to kill Christian because they didn't want them to be spreading
Hold on, Ali. So just to clarify, the Roman Empire span over a long period of time. So Jesus actually lived during the Roman Empire. It was the Romans that actually crucified Jesus.
That's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say. I'm saying the same thing what you're saying. They didn't want that, right? So when they realized when Christ died, they realized that he was the Messiah, right? Okay. So then from that period of time, so when did Leonardo DiCaprio decided now to portray or
Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci. When he decided to draw now Jesus Christ, this was the same timeline, right? This was not this the Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, was not this the same timeline?
It wasn't. Jesus died around the 1st century. This is the 15th century.
But then would
14 centuries later.
Okay, would not the Bible still be there within that timeline? Would it not be studying the Bible for them not to know that this is the image of Christ? In which
timeline? So in the timeline of Jesus' time, there was no Christian Bible. The Bible didn't come until 200-300 years later.
Okay, so then when he was drawn, then obviously within that timeline they didn't know about it, right? Is that what you're saying?
It is fair to say that they didn't in the 1400s. No one knew what Jesus looked like.
Then where did the Bible came from? How did the Bible people start knowing about the Bible?
See, that's going into a whole mad conversation, honestly.
But you know what I'm trying to get at, because if they're drawing something,
I guess Sally's point.
Yeah, if they're trying to draw something, but yeah. I don't want to get into it, but I'm trying to understand the timeline where it went all wrong, because Roman had anyway, we'll just leave it.
No, I get what you're saying, and I think it's about thinking in terms of you're thinking about how did this all blow up or get wrong, in terms of how Jesus was portrayed. And as I mentioned before, there were so many other different communities around the 1500s or even before that were locally portraying Jesus in their local image or view. And that was kept amongst their people, because this is how their people would worship Christ. The dangerous effect is when you are now imposing this image of God on another community. And that's what the missionaries were doing. They were imposing this image of God onto a whole different community. That's completely different to a community itself creating an image of Christ and using that image, if you get what I mean. And that's where the dangers, and I would describe the racism side of it, comes in, is because you're now intentionally portraying it in a different light to other people, knowing that there is a difference. And then you then have to talk about the church's role in this, because the church can't be naive and unaware of what is going on here. They're fully aware, as in when a lot of these missionaries come, let's say in the 20th century, they would go around and they would give their books, children's books. And in all these children's books, they're portraying Jesus as blonde hair, blue-eyed in all these different communities. And the church is complicit in this, because they can't say they didn't know that these books were done. Like with all these things, it goes through someone to agree to say yes, whatever. and they would have picked up on stuff like that. But they're still allowing this imagery to go through, especially to young minds that are more susceptible as young kids. So that's why I think the description of racism, I think, is a perfect description in this day and age for something that's continued for so long, knowing that it's wrong and nothing is being done about it.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. I think I guess it's interesting that it's a bit of a nuanced topic, isn't it? Because in terms of whether it's racist to portray Jesus as blonde-haired, blue eyes, there's an argument for both sides of the coin, because on one hand you can say if communities in particular were drawing Jesus in the image of their own people, and at the time Europeans were doing that, then you can't arguably say that that's racist, because they're only doing what other communities were doing in terms of their portrayal of Jesus. However, where you're moving on to another aspect of it in terms of colonialism and that sort of stuff, where it's being imposed on other communities, that particular image, then there's an argument. Then the argument becomes stronger to say that it certainly is racist. And that moves on to the next part of our conversation, because the question that I wanted to tackle next was whether there is an agenda, and do we give Christianity a pass for its role in slavery? And before we delve really heavily into that topic, I just sort of wanted to get the views from each one of you guys as to what you think in terms of that. I'm going to start off with Mo.
I think, so as I was mentioning before, in terms of their portrayal of Jesus, how the church was complicit basically in allowing it. And I believe in the argument of, you know, when someone says, I'm not racist, and it's good to say that you're not racist, but the main thing is you should be anti-racist. And not being racist is not the same as being anti-racist. And I feel that's where the church kind of fails, in terms of they want to sit on the fence and step back, but they're not actually actively doing anything to combat certain things. And in terms of the whole racism thing, I do feel they get a massive bligh, just because they were one of the biggest beneficiaries of the 1833 Racism Act in the UK. So the Anglican Church were paid, I think it was a third of the money. So all those money that we were paying back in our taxes, all that money we were paying back in our taxes until 2015, the church was benefiting from that. And I just feel like, I feel they're easily forgotten about in the story of slavery. The church isn't really mentioned much as a lot of the stuff that they did do and contribute to and benefited from. I think it's easy to attack and victimize certain private businesses out there, but then you need to be consistent in how you're doing that, because the church definitely had a big role in things like that. That's my thoughts anyway.
Coach, you want to chime in? So the question is there an agenda, and do we give Christianity a pass for its role in slavery?
I think that's the stuff where sometimes I think, just going back to the whole idea of, and this is what I keep on saying, because even if you talk about the localized kind of ideology of Jesus, and Jesus being the image of the locals, or whatever we want to talk about, and I'm guessing the locals in England is changing. That dynamics is changing, because the black person is British. So how do I find that sense of Jesus in my own image? How does that represent? What does that look like to me? So I think it's difficult to have those kind of conversations, because even in the Guardian, I know the Archbishop for the Church of England came out to say that the Church of England need to rethink their portrayal of Jesus as white. And this is what I'm saying regarding these kind of conversations, that it needs to come to a point where these conversations need to be had. Because if we even going back to the Bible, and yes, when you read some of the description of the Bible, we could say it's a bit you might not be able to understand. It's still difficult to say that Jesus is black, as in finite to say that Jesus is black, but we definitely know that Jesus is not white at all. But I think even if that's the case, then some of this imagery is something that needs to be rethought about. And I think, and I guess this also goes back to some of the conversations we had before, where we discussed whether it's our duty to educate people about racism. And the reason why I bring up that conversation is because in this kind of, in this predicament, in this specific conversation, I almost see that the depiction of Jesus as a white man kind of evaluates the whole understanding of that white supremacy and that white privilege and what that comes with it. It brings the whole subpar kind of status that black people get. And I think some people already use the whole conversation around colonialism. And even when you talk specifically about Ghana and what Christianity was used to do in Ghana, where we know that a lot of the kings that were in power at that time were taken to the Seychelles. And at that point is where they were indoctrinated, where they were introduced to Christianity. And the whole idea was that once they actually come back from the Seychelles and they go back to their kind of communities, they'll be pushing this ideology along. So it was done systematically in order to kind of give this whole kind of white supremacy. So I think right now the conversation that's being had where we're rethinking about the imagery of Jesus, sometimes I always say when it's not the benefit of the actual perpetrator, then these kind of things these conversations might not be had. Because yes, we've understood that the church's role in slavery and the kind of like the whole reparations that they receive regarding slavery. And then we're understanding that this imagery, how this imagery is still being used. So of course, at some point, someone somewhere knows that it's not right. Hence the reason why you have this Archbishop for the Church of England, Welby, coming out to make this kind of comment. So I think it's about time that these conversations are being had again, because I just feel like it's difficult to belong to a religion. And when you close your eyes, and I do not care what people say, not that I don't care what people say, because the imagery that's been put of Jesus, pushed with Jesus being white, it's hard to close your eyes and not imagine God to be white if you've grown up seeing this imagery of Jesus as a white man. I for one, don't think it, and I think it's difficult for our children to embrace that without feeling a bit subpar to a white person.
Ali, you want to chime in?
The question is what? Can you rephrase that quickly, please?
Yeah, so the question is whether there's an agenda, and if so, do we give Christianity a pass for its role in slavery?
First of all, there is an agenda, and second of all, no, I shouldn't give the church a pass regarding it, because like what my host had just mentioned, it clearly is. As I mentioned previously, I do not want to use the word racism. All I wanted to say is dominate, empowering, privilege, and just feeling that they are higher, they're superior. So I don't want to use the word race. The race word is, they already know within the Bible, Revelation chapter 1 verses 14:5, they already know the answer. So the way I see it is, I can argue with two sides of this. It's either they left that chapter deliberately for us to know the true identity of him, or they are doing it deliberately to suit their need. And to suit their need is all of what I've just mentioned, the key point. So the church itself, as you can imagine, there's two sides of the church. You've got Church of England, and then you've got Catholic. So Catholic are the one that first started all of these problems since after the Roman Empire. So they dominated it, and then they decided to do whatever they wanted to do. And until now is to say Jesus, they've portrayed as Jesus as a white. But for me personally, I'm just going to leave it from there. I don't think that there is a clearly agenda, and the agenda is already stated at whatever they're doing, and definitely they shouldn't have a pass. So there should be, because the reason why I'm mentioning this is like, you cannot separate Christ from his authenticity, right? And then from his color, and saying you're accepting a Christ as your Lord and Savior, right? You accept him as a whole, or either you don't. So that's my argument in that.
Thank you for that, Ali. Koj, does anyone want to, in our audience, want to speak on any of the topics that we've discussed today?
Yeah, we've had some comments here. We've had Jesse, we've had Nathaniel. Nathaniel, is this a part that you want to kind of, maybe Nathaniel could come in then after Jesse could leave to part some of the comments that he shared here. To add to this conversation at this point?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Oh, good. It's a difficult one. So with Jesus being white, I really think it's a tactic that they used consciously to promote the notion of white superiority. It was a tactic. I don't think they were saying that Jesus wasn't black. I just think it more aligned with their agenda to say that actually we are superior to everybody else on the planet. So if Jesus was white and divine, we are white and we are divine. It's saying that the Bible says that we were made in his image, or Jesus was made in, or God was made in his own image, or we were made after God's own image. And if we were made after God and we are white, then we are the people. And it goes hand in hand with the dehumanization of the African race and the Indian races and the Asian races as such. So as you see the colonization and the spread of the Europeans across the globe, they use this tactic to dehumanize and to devalue all that wasn't white. So I think it's purely a part of that. It's just another tool in their armory to say that we are divine and we are better than all of you. You guys are just savages. And that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, thanks, Nathaniel. And I think just to go over the comments that you shared with us, the church were far more insidious and instrumental in the colonization of the African continent. The missionaries arrived alongside the traders. The missionaries were the soft hand of the authority, and they set up the schools, which not only taught European religion and teaching, but also used to promote the European brand, which contributed to the destruction of communities. The notion of Black Jesus goes against the view of white superiority. So white Jesus was made to be the superhero of the day. And I think that's just what you kind of wrapped up in your...
So are you saying that they played good cop, bad cop, yeah?
Good cop, bad cop. If you're jab, you're not ready. And you're knocked out and everything is gone, mate. That's what Nathaniel is just saying to us, really.
I think Jesse wanted to come in.
Get Jesse to share his kind of comments with us, please.
What's going on, people? So I've tuned in quite late. From what you guys, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Cool. From what you guys were saying about the question, obviously I commented saying, well, if he wasn't black, why did they make such an effort to actually go around the whole entire world and market, this white Jesus image? You know, if you look at every other religion after colonization, Sikh, Hinduism, Islam, there's always a whitened version of these people. So in order for them to win over the world or win over African people, because obviously, you know, in my opinion, the first World War started in Africa during colonial times, is when they realized our stronghold and our power is in our gods and our spirituality. So they needed to customize that in such a way that it reflects them. So when our kids grow up, you know, and, you know, they will see a white image and they see that as obviously someone that's, you know, powerful. But what I find funny was when I went to Germany and when I went to places like Italy, for example, there are certain churches that have a big, bold, black statue of the, you know, Mary and, you know, the baby, the Black Madonna and Child and Jesus. And they all tell you, even with St. Christopher or St. Nicholas, they all tell you that these people are black people. They understand that because their side of Catholicism or Christianity has got different books written in different languages. So there's parts in some of those verses, I don't know the verses offhand, but if you look at, if I remember correctly, Deuteronomy, I think it may have been chapter 1 or 2, where they were basically dealing with the plagues that were infecting the Israelites when they had obviously left Egypt. And they describe those that had, you know, to identify this virus or plague, those that had white blotched skin or blonde hair in another sense, you know, were supposed to isolated away from the camp and whatnot. These people were obviously infected and whatnot. When you look at the tribes of Esau, you can directly relate those to the Ashanti, the Benin tribes, the Yoruba tribes of West Africa. The Hebrew Israelite, the real Hebrew Israelite or Hebrew African Jew. I've been to Israel myself, and you will see them. The Sudanese, the Ethiopian Jews, they're all black. When you go to Israel, inside one of the temples where they claim that this is where Jesus took his last breath or whatever, inside the temple, I actually have a picture of the 12 disciples, around the bed of Jesus or where Jesus is laying to rest, and they're all literally colored in black. Now, my tour guide tried to tell me that, oh, that was just due to, erosion or the light or people keep taking photos or whatever. But then what you find is that all the other pictures that are around him remain to be white. They all remain to be white for some reason, but this one automatically. So essentially, when you're dealing with this, it's in the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? No one from that climate naturally will be able to survive as a white man. There's no white. When I mean white, I'm talking Brad Pitt white, Boris Johnson white. They wouldn't be able to survive in the so-called Middle East during that time. Do you see where I'm coming from? The Jewish people that are there are Semites, meaning they're mixed in with the indigenous people who are Africans. Do you see where I'm coming from? Hence why Hitler was killing them. Hitler was like, you guys are not even white. Do you see where I'm coming from? But that was another discussion. But yeah, in terms of the whole whitewashing, it's 100% an agenda. Look at it now. Look at our music. Look at our culture. They always try and whitewash it. So,
would you say
yeah.
though to portray Jesus as white?
Say that again?
Would you say that it's racist to portray Jesus as white?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Racism is white supremacy, and the dominant society are pushing white supremacy. So yes, it is a construct. It was created for them to enslave Africans. I mean, it's worked. It's the best marketing plan that's worked so far in the entire history of man, unfortunately. But this is where we have to have conversations like this to understand why. Having a black Jesus in your house as a Christian is not a bad thing. Some Christians that they even scared to sometimes say that Jesus is black. They'll be like, oh, he was olive skin, and I'm like, yeah, that's the oppressor that's made you think that he can never be a black man. But we know everything religious, everything powerful, everything magical about this world comes and started in Africa. So that's me. That's my thoughts on the question.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jesse, though, some of the stuff that you just shared with us. Because I, for one, as well, I've been to Israel before, and I must say I missed where you went to, where you saw the disciples being depicted.
Yeah.
But everything else that I saw was, it wasn't even white, it was pale, as white can be. Especially when you go unorthodox churches, man, the big branch. So yeah, and I think even whilst I was there, I was speaking to my vicar, and I asked that direct question to say, I'm a bit perplexed to come all the way to Israel to see this depiction of Jesus. And I tried to understand his ideology of it, because obviously when you understand vicars, they go to theologian school and stuff, so they know more about theology and how depiction sort of thing. But I'm wondering, did you get that same sense of regarding the imagery in Israel? Because I saw a lot of kind of whitewash kind of imagery when I went there as well.
Yeah, it was funny because I was in Egypt. So I was in Egypt doing a 10-day stay in Egypt, and then on the actual excursion package, there was I think there was 2 night or 1 night stay to Jerusalem in Israel. So we took the coach up there. And coming from Egypt, where I could see direct links to the Ashanti kingdom, the Yoruba kingdom, any West African kingdom, like direct links. I'm talking, when I mean direct, I'm looking at Tutankhamun and he's got an Ashanti head. One's there, like I'm looking at, to go to Israel now, where my mom obviously was Christian, he was with me. All we can see is a heavy Roman influence. A heavy Roman influence on all the old ancient structures, especially in Jerusalem. You go to certain parts where, how it's split up. You've got one side is Palestine, obviously one side is Israel. And the imagery was just crazy. It was like I'm outside some of these unorthodox churches and you're seeing black Hebrew rabbis begging for money. and then the white Jewish rabbis are walking straight past them. And that there for me just baffled me, because it's like, you need to understand that even with language, why are they called the Hebrew Jews or Hebrew Israelites, but the white Semites, or the mixed race Semites, I should say, are called Jewish? Everything with ish at the end of it means you're coming from a crossbreed, if you want to call it, or a genetic gene pool that is not one of your own purity. Irish, Scottish. You know, we all know that Great Britain, the indigenous man was the Cheddar Man, as they scientists have come out and said it, which was black with blue eyes. I mean, they even tried to keep the blue eyes there to let people have hope, you know what's there. So it's like, you got to look at the situation from, you know, a standpoint, and going to Israel to learn about a lot of this stuff. It was quite shocking that I couldn't find any reference to me or anyone in the book. Whereas if you look at the Bible, there is plenty of evidence and reference to an African presence, a heavy African presence, especially in the Old Testament. So, but yeah, it was definitely the same with Israel, in terms of the imagery and that.
Jesse, to come back to what you experienced, if Israelite clearly understand this, why are they still proceeding it? From your understanding.
When you talk about Israelites or Israel as a nation or the country, I'm assuming you're referring to that. The reason why they still perpetrate it is because when you're conquering a people, or when you're trying to, you know, take over a land, you can't have those people rising up or coming to a point where they get smart and realize, oh, what's going on? This is all a trick. So what they continue to do is they continue to perpetrate false images or imagery to keep our subconscious down, to make us never ever rise up, think that we're above this. So if you look at even slavery, what I've learned today, with slavery, it was that 70% of the plantation owners in parts of Virginia and parts of the South were Jewish people. And the Jewish people were the ones that were bringing in the Bible, apparently from King James, who was at the time in Ghana, in Jamestown, who was rewriting his own version of the Bible. Because, you know, again, during the slavery, obviously, you know, we were treated as stock, as you're seeing the stock exchange right now. And Portugal, Spain, what's the Dutch, Berlin, Dutch, sorry, and Britain were all at sort of odds or competition. So you had the Bible written in Latin. And at the time, obviously, as you see with King Henry VIII and the Church of England, a lot of these kings don't like rules. So they tried to change things to their own actual, you know, thing to benefit them. So they were sending these books to the Jewish people. And what they were realizing was that the Jews could see in some of these books how there was links to how some of these people are African. So they kept rewriting it back into Hebrew. So then you're slowly going to get a break off of this part of Christianity. This is where you get the Hebrew Israelites. So some of those black guys that are running around in America, you know, wearing the Hebrew Israelite stuff, the book that they may have, someone will tell you, oh, that's not the right book, or the book we have is the right one. You find a lot of these people owned or were part of creating these books. So when you got the King James version, when you've got this version, that version, this version, it's all catered to somebody else's agenda, which is from the same root of white supremacy, but what they're thinking is, right, the Jewish are like, right, we can't have these West Africans learning about what's going on, because there's revolts in Jamaica. There's over 200 revolts. What I learned today, over 200 revolts per month in Brazil alone. And these guys are reading the same book. Remember, if you watch the movie Birth of a Nation with, talking about, what's my man's name? Nathaniel Turner, Nat Turner. And he would read the book, but he would read it in certain verses and certain codes to help the other slaves know when there was going to be a rebellion or where to strike next. Do you see where I'm coming from? So once they clocked that, they were like, raw, like, we need to change it. This is why people were burnt. Their eyes were burnt out for reading, or their hands were chopped off for reading. Do you see where I'm coming from? So in order to suppress us, I mean, look at, not to digress, but look at Nick Cannon right now. You know, he hasn't said, from what I've seen, anything anti-Semitic. He's just confirmed information he's seen or read and researched. But already they've silenced him and they've pushed him down back into his little box and made him learn about their history and culture. So they need to keep perpetrating false narratives in order to keep themselves above. Otherwise, they're going to end up losing their power. You know, so that's from what to answer your question. That's how I see it. Thank you for that contribution, Jesse. Yeah, there was certainly a lot of informative points there, and even stuff that you sort of sparked in my mind in terms of trying to sort of read up on certain things, just to even educate myself. Codge, is there anyone else that wants to chime in at this stage?
I think at this point we might be able to open it to the audience. There isn't any further contributions in the chat. I know Nathaniel mentioned something here to say, I don't think it's a case of Jesus being white or black. I think the promotion of white Jesus was equating the white race as a divine race. I believe that this was an important factor in justifying slavery, colonization, and resource exploitation. This notion helps to justify the white notion that they are superior to every other race on the planet. And I think he also mentioned that he agrees with a lot of the points that Jesse mentioned, especially the most effective marketing today. When you look at the whole kind of like white kind of savior.
I thought Coca-Cola was. I thought Coca-Cola was the most effective. They turned Santa red, innit? Santa was green before Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Does anyone in the audience want to chip in at this point here? Even though you might have not left a comment, is there anything that people would like to share on their thoughts on this conversation so far?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I did want to add in terms of the other comment that was made from Cam, which was in terms of, do we give Christianity a pass? Especially highlighting everything that Jesse has brought up and the context in regards to everything that they saw, that you, Kojo and Jesse saw in Israel. Would you say that Christianity deserves a pass, that they were being used to weaponize racism and white supremacy, that it wasn't their fault, that somebody else depicted this and they kind of just sat by and had to allow it to happen? Or would you say that Christianity was complicit in all of this and just allowed it all to continue? I personally think the latter, but I would be interested to hear what everybody else thinks.
I think just before I let Jesse come in, because clearly Jesse has done way more research on this than I have. But obviously, when we mention the day, I wonder who we mean by the day. Because we just going back to your kind of explanation on the first part of your argument, to say that they, because it's an organization, isn't it? If you think of the word Christians is being like the followers of Jesus Christ, isn't it? And being like Christ-like. So when you say they, then this is something that was kind of formed. So I just think that Christianity was complicit. But then that's tough though, because I have to go back to say who they are. Because if you already establish a religion and then someone kind of takes it upon themselves to whitewash it in order to gain some sort of superiority, which then goes with the agenda of slavery and colonization, then it might be difficult to attribute that to you. But at this point, as I said, I can't establish who the they are. I'm not sure what Jesse kind of his viewpoint on this.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. It's funny because it's like this, yeah. If me and you go to a shop right now and we witness somebody stealing something, and then the person turns around and blames it on, you know, me and Coach or me and Mo, and then police, you know, turn up, they're gonna arrest somebody. We're gonna try our best to make sure that we don't get caught up in this. We're gonna try and prove our innocence, right? I would love to know the institution, the pastor, the pope, any priest that has tried to prove his innocence when it comes to not partaking in slavery. Now, you see, the thing is this, yeah? The reason why Christianity was complicit, you got to look at the early 1600s, prior to the Moors obviously losing their power and grip in Spain and in Europe, and you're getting this whole Renaissance, this birth of the Renaissance.
what was the edict of, I can't remember the name of the Pope, but it was an edict that was put out that the Pope sent to all nations across the world. This is what ties into the story of Marco Polo as well. And he said that anyone who doesn't subscribe to Christianity or to Jesus Christ or the Catholic religion, which was prior to the 1600s, created and invented in terms of the actual white Jesus, having it conformed into a book by a council in Nicaea during, I think it was 325 AD, if I'm correct. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
It was 315.
315
AD, yeah.
Right, by a guy called Constantine. I think it was Constantine, right. Also, before I continue, there's a very, very good documentary you guys need to watch. It might be on Netflix. It's called Caesar's Messiah, the conspiracy to invent Jesus Christ. You need to really watch that, because it's white historians talking about the exact same thing we're talking about, and breaking it down. So anyway, back to the 1600s. This Pope has now sent out more than 6,000 crusaders. Remember the crusaders, the guys with the big red cross and they've gone around the entire world slaughtering people that wouldn't bow down to Christianity. Now you have to ask yourself, if you right now today don't want to be a Christian or don't want to be a Muslim, you have the choice. You don't have to. But for you not knowing what Christianity and Islam is at that time, and having a force come in and killing you because you said no, or killing you because you don't want to learn, or you're comfortable within your own cultures and your own practices, shows you how much of the aggression, the dominance, the anger was actually inside these people. Do you see where I'm coming from? So when it comes to dealing with they were fully complicit. In fact, they led the whole entire thing, because again, you're seeing in parts of the Mongolian Empire with Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. The Crusaders have gone in there. They've tried to convert the Chinese at the time, because China and Mongolia are at war, and some of the Mongoloid and some of the Chinese emperors took on this religion. And before you know it, there was war in their country again. And everywhere these Christian missionaries have gone, Africa, we can talk about Ghana, we can talk about Nigeria, even with the Biafran Civil War, we can talk about so much different things. Uganda as well. Kenya, they actually had concentration camps in Kenya. This is as early as 1940, 1950. And again, wherever these men there show up with that, with a red cross, the white hood, or wherever you call it, ironically similar to the Ku Klux Klan, there's always war, there's always problems, there's always famine, there's always devastation. So they were 100% complicit. 100%. They shouldn't get a pass.
Jesse, before you, sorry to cut you, I wanted to understand this properly. When this crusade are coming into any countries, are they deliberately causing and harm so that they can, on the people there, the community can actually accept the whitewash Jesus as white, or just Christianity? I just want you to differentiate them two things.
Hold on, let me come in. I know with the Crusaders, they literally came on horses, armor, swords, everything. They weren't coming there to say, hi, how you doing? Don't get it twisted. When the Pope sent out the letter to invite the Crusaders, he did do it on the premise of as a pilgrimage. So they were going around as pilgrimages. But the thing is, they were called to arms at the same time. That's why they all had their shields of the Red Cross, whatever, their silver armory and all of that. Put it this way, there were people that spent their life savings to armor up to go for the Crusades. Like they bankrupt themselves just so that they could armor up to go for the Crusades, to go around and impose this religion onto all the other countries.
Yeah, but are they imposing a religion, or are they imposing as Jesus is white? Which one is it? Or is it both?
So in those times, they didn't have the image of Jesus. They were imposing the religion. So it was a religion. It wasn't the actual image of Jesus. Yeah, no, I think Jesse wanted to come in.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, yeah, it's what was it saying is when they were coming in, there wasn't even a question of race at the time, but it was that same superiority of we are the ones in charge. We are. I can't remember the exact time when Michelangelo was commissioned to paint that famous painting you're seeing in the what's that place in
It
Washington
was
DC?
1499.
1499. So it might have actually been. It might have actually already been around at the time. I'm not too sure, but at the same time, when you do get to submit, the first thing you're going to see is a white Jesus, because that was again their issue that we're having. Because what Constantine, when he created the Council in Nicaea, you know, there was a lot of misinformation there. There was a lot of anger between some of the guys he had called. There was a guy called Ananias or Armaius, a black Hebrew that lived in Rome at the time, and he actually had to run away from the meeting. He was actually a wanted man because, you know, and I know it's going to probably digress into something else, but he was saying to Constantine, he's like, you can't take some of the stories that we have from ancient Kemet on ancient Nubia and parts of Africa and other places and put it together and create this. This is wrong. You can't do that. This is the people. They're not going to listen to this because, again, at that time in Rome, they were having a lot of rebellions. They're having a lot of riots from the people that they have obviously invited into their countries after conquering their cities and towns. And the people weren't subscribing. So they said, we need to control all their beliefs in one way. So back to the Crusaders, like Mo said, they came with swords. They came with armor. They weren't coming to talk. So I don't think you even got a chance to see if Jesus was white or black. But when you did get a chance to understand the religion, there was no painting or no reference to him being an African, because anyone outside of Europe at that time was colored. Chinese, you know, the Indians or the Persians, Africans, you know, Southern Pan Asians as well. So it's really, it's really that peak now, because look at how it plays out. You know, look at how it's affected Africa. Whatever, you know, people want to lighten their skin. You know, people want to give us British names instead of our African names. You know, so yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, and just to add quickly though, just what you just mentioned, Jesse, just regarding the naming, and that's the stuff. When we look at the damage of what Christianity has done, not only in the culture, but even looking at the naming, because a lot of the excuses that you hear from most people is that, oh, but these names are in the Bible. And obviously what people then forget is that names have a meaning. Anyway, I'll be digressing, man. I don't want to, it's just that when you mentioned that, it just brought up all these kind of conversations that we've had in the episode before anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Hebrew. Jesse is a Hebrew name. It was son of David. You know, when you're looking at some of the names in the Bible, they're Hebrew. But again, my mom was like, we're not going to call you Nana Yao. We're going to call you Jesse, because Jesse was probably going to get you into school and into a job. And we don't even want to, they didn't even think of that being an argument. It was just like, yeah, we're going to call it. Do you see where I'm coming from? So it's sad, but this is the reality. You know, that's why my son has got a full African name. Anyone that comes into contact with my son is going to learn how to pronounce his name. You know, the ones there, like even the nursery, I've corrected them 3 or 4 times. I said, no. His name, you see where I'm coming from? So just to let him know and understand that. Do you see where I'm coming from? That your name is so important because it gives you identity.
Yeah. And Nathaniel, is there something, I know you've just added a comment, is there something you want to add at this point?
Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, no, Jesse, like, I would love to read some of the books that you've been reading, man. It's interesting, really interesting. But generally speaking, I'll say the church was a little more than complicit, just because the church as an institution, and when I say that as an institution, I don't mean the individual church, but the actual governing bodies of the church used to pool their money and invest in the slave trade and colonization. They used to fund the ships that the slavers used. They used to lend money to the traders. So for me, it's hard to say that they were just complicit, that they just went along with it when they were financing it and they have profited from it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. You really and truly look at what's happening now with these statues getting taken down, and you're finding out. There's another good documentary for you guys to watch. Is Britain's involvement in the slave trade. Very, very good documentary. Boy, I mean, anything from Lloyd's Bank to Tate Sugar, even down to some of the alcohols that people drink, like, you know, Captain Morgan's rum, Ray Nephew. Listen to the names: Jack Daniels, you know, Johnny Walker's. If you look at the imagery of most of these people, these were white pirates, British pirates. And I love the fact that when you speak to British people today, they do this whole comparison to America. Oh, America is just, you know, really racist over here. We're not as bad. I'm like, you're not as bad because this is the fundamentals. What America's going through right now, we had that way, way back in the early 1800s, 1900s. You see where I'm coming from? You know, William Wilberforce didn't abolish slavery, or neither did Abraham Lincoln. They stopped it because we were rebelling. There was more than 300 rebellions on the island of Jamaica. You know, even if you listen to the wording of Jamaica, it's actually a tree saying, meaning I'm stuck in this place, because it was a prison. So if your stock is rebelling, if you're a farmer and all your pigs keep running away, and it's not like it's every single month, you're going to stop. If the next farmer's having the same issue, you're going to stop selling pigs. So that's how they saw us. So they were like, oh, we need to abolish this. And then Abraham Lincoln thought, okay, I could use slaves to help me fight my civil war against Britain. So we're going to use Britain as an enemy. Oh yeah, they're the ones that are in full slavery. They're the ones that are profit, which was all true. But it's convenient when America needs help from slaves to fight their war. Ironically, look at today. The Middle East are terrorists, the Middle East, and we need more soldiers. Black soldiers are on the front line. I've got friends in the army that are in the front line. They'll tell me, yeah, I was on the front line, but we never really saw the whites ever take certain trips or tours that we took. And we've always been used. And that's the issue we need to understand, is that, you know, when we're dealing with these people, when I mean these people, I'm talking about the dominant society, I'm talking about white people, you know, those are racist. Tell them that, look, your atrocities, look at how they behaved when they were going to go attack Winston Churchill. The whole country was, oh no, what are you doing? Look at them. And it's like you lot are making yourself even more racist than ever now. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
I know. It's funny you mentioned those things. There's been some comments here by EA. I know we need to be wrapping up soon. So
okay, yeah, I wanted to wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just read up quickly. EA just mentioned, don't forget that England were rebelling to the idea of Constantine with their pagan religion, and therefore had to merge the two, which is why we have Christmas and Easter. Proper bastardized today. I love the word bastardized. Unbelievable, mate. Almost kind of reminds you of Game of Thrones, mate. They keep using that word. He also went on to mention the purity of Christianity. I believe he was mentioning the purity of Christianity can only be found in Ethiopia, which didn't organically spread across Africa. And I think Nathaniel, just whilst Jesse was going through the revolutions that happened in order for Black people to be free, I think Nathaniel was just mentioning the Haitian Revolution. And we all know what kind of happened with the French involvement in the Haitian Revolution as well in America. I believe till now they're meant to be still paying the French for that revolution. They're still paying for that, I believe. So, yeah, I think that
yeah. Just wanted to thank everyone for their contributions to this conversation. It's certainly been thought-provoking in terms of the ideas and the thoughts that it sparked, taking it forward. And I think just beyond sort of people chiming in and putting their opinions in place, there's also been sort of a wider effort to sort of educate and inform. And I certainly have to say that's one thing I can take out of this conversation. But before we shut off, just wanted to let everyone know that you can find us on Twitter at LDN Perspective, but also on Instagram at the LDN Perspective. As I said, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. This episode will be going out on YouTube, and you can catch many of our other episodes on YouTube as well. So that's it. That's the LDN Perspective. Until next time.
perspectives, different views, one voice.